We're going to go ahead and talk about our Chapter 100 bond project. Ms. MacArthur will introduce that, and then we'll hear from some of the Ready Board.
Yes, so I think Matt Williams is going with the Ready Board, is going to get up and talk to us and introduce our new project with Kraft Heinz, and he's going to give a little overview, and then our Kraft Heinz team is going to be here to speak as well.
Thank you, everyone. I need help like that. Thank you. Yes. Well, thanks for letting us jump up the agenda. Appreciate it very much. So I'm Matt Williams. I'm a member of the Ready Incentive Subcommittee. With me here tonight on that same committee are Kathleen Bergen-Hipke and Dave Griggs. We've got Bernie Andrews and Stacy Button with the Ready staff, and Karen Hensley Cholstowska, who is the Director of Global Economic Incentives with Kraft Heinz. So that's our team. We're here tonight to discuss a local Chapter 100 application from Kraft Heinz. Last week, the Kraft Heinz team was here and made a presentation before the Finance Committee and was able to answer questions from the committee about the project. Kraft Heinz is a global food and beverage company that has a company-wide focus on reducing its carbon footprint with a goal of net zero by 2050. The company has 79 manufacturing and processing facilities and over 200 external manufacturers, including co-packers that manufacture or process products for the Kraft Heinz brand. As you may know, the local Kraft Heinz plant makes Oscar Mayer hot dogs, all of them in the country, actually made right here. And they also employ over 440 full-time employees. So in order to meet these corporate sustainability goals and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the local plant will need to spend approximately $92 million over the next 5 years to modernize their Columbia facility. Another option under consideration is for Kraft Heinz to move the production of hot dogs to a co-packer in another location that already has the same sustainability equipment in place that would allow the packaging of hot dogs with recycled materials. As I mentioned, the company already works with over 200 external manufacturers and co-packers, which would make this a very, very viable option for the company. The company is evaluating these two alternatives, and a decision is expected in June. The Kraft Heinz team has put together a package of local, state, and federal incentives to help strengthen the case for the long-term retention of the Columbia facility and their employees. Kraft Heinz is requesting a 75% property tax abatement on the personal property, primarily machinery and equipment, that would be put into place over the next 5 years. An important point that I want to make here is that the company is seeking incentives only on $50 million of the $92 million total investment. The abatement request that we're talking about here only applies to the new equipment necessary to upgrade the packing lines. None of the existing fixtures or equipment in the facility now will be included in that abatement. Also, any new equipment replaced before the end of the abatement period will be fully taxed. Also important to note, the company is not requesting any real property tax abatement on the real property improvements that need to be made to the facility and the infrastructure. So it's part of the difference there between the $92 million total investment and the $50 million request for abatement. The financial impact to CPS will be additional personal property tax revenue of $1,063,505 over the next 10 years. I want to emphasize that this is additional tax revenue after abatement generated by this investment in addition to the existing tax revenue already received from Kraft Heinz. In closing, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to visit with you tonight. Ready values our long-term relationship and partnership with CPS. Kraft Heinz has been a significant employer and a good corporate citizen in our community for many years. We're excited about this initiative by the company and appreciate your support of this Chapter 100 application, which will help ensure that these 440 jobs and this investment stays in our community. So with that, I will pause and ask for questions for me or Karen or any of our group.
And just for those of you who may not have remembered how Chapter 100 works, what we're being asked to vote on tonight is to inform how I'm going to vote when we meet as taxing entities in a couple weeks. So this is the 21st. And so however the board votes tonight is how I have to vote. And I'll be one of 7 taxing entities voting. Is it city, county, library, Boone County Family Resources? So there's a bunch of us.
5.
But however you vote is how I vote on the project. So, questions, Mr. Harper?
I know you said how much is going to be abated and how much would be provided by this project, and that's. I was wondering if you actually had, just to give context, how much annually Kraft Heinz actually does pay in personal property tax.
Today, we do have that number. I don't have it off the top of my head.
I have that, so in 2023, in personal property tax, Kraft Heinz paid. Okay, sure. In 2023, in personal property tax, Kraft Heinz paid $499,435.
So for context, that amount should remain approximately the same moving forward. We should receive some additional from this project, and then, of course, abate 3/4 of the additional amounts, but not anything related to the $500,000 that you just said.
Correct. Keeping in mind that personal property.
It fluctuates.
it-
I understood that just that's the property that will continue to be taxed.
Correct.
Understanding that there's depreciation, so it might go down a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do also want to point out, I had asked Matt a question earlier today, asked if there are ever included in the performance agreements a requirement to maintain employees, and he said that is kind of up to the city's, the county's attorney to work that out, but it could be, the abatement could be adjusted downward if the number of employees falls. Oftentimes, these projects have to increase employment in order to qualify, but the goal with this project, from what I understand, is to maintain those employees, is to maintain a job for those people.
Very well said, yeah. So our county council will work with bond counsel to draft a performance agreement, which will hold the company accountable to meet certain criteria, one of which would be jobs.
Seeing no other questions, we will do a roll call vote. Do what? We don't have a motion. So
So I
we will-
move to
Thank you.
instruct President Waters to vote yes on the Chapter 100 bond.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, now we will have a roll call vote. I was still in presentation mode. Whoa. Okay.
All right, Mr. Willoughby,
Yes.
Ms. Farrell,
Yes.
Mr. Cobbins,
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Ms. Snodgrass,
Yes.
Mr. Lyman,
Yes.
Ms. Waters.
Yes. Okay, so I will be voting yes on the 21st. Thank you, board, and thank you for sticking around until now.
Thank you so much for your support.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Waters, for letting them come up early.
Okay. Oh, because I was. Okay, we have had a request from Dr. Yearwood to table to postpone until the next meeting, the update on the CSIP. We've had several people need to leave that were involved in that presentation. So unless there is an objection to that, we will just remove that item from the agenda and we'll get that update probably at our June meeting. It'll be rolled into another CSIP presentation. So that brings us to our financial update. Ms. MacArthur's queuing up as fast as she can.
Thank you, guys. So the main thing that we are going to talk about tonight is an update on where our revenues are at in our budget process. Now, we've come to the last several months with updates throughout the months on the budget process. We're going to talk about where our revenue projections are today as the state budget was just approved last week, and then a summary of our one-time additions and recurring adds, and a look at our 5-year model. So to start out our presentation, we have to look at our property tax revenue, which is just a reminder, again, our property tax revenue, it makes up 50% of our total operating budget. Again, operating budget, when we refer to that, is just our general and our teachers fund together as our operating budget. And so this is a historical view. Again, the years across the top are calendar years, because when we're talking about our property tax revenue, we are going to look at calendar year 2024, which will drive our revenue for our 24-25 school year budget. So you can see the large increase in between the 2022 and 2023 increase in revenue. Our revenue there is across the bottom. And we do not expect an increase in our tax rate, $5.6731. Again, we don't have any voter-approved increases for the tax rate, so we suspect that will remain relatively the same, except possibly for minor changes in the Prop C rollback. About our assessed valuation, we're assuming a 3% increase, as next year is a non-reassessment year by our county. And so those are the assumptions that we're making going forward. And so the difference in revenue there between the current year and next year is $4,233,341 there for our property tax revenue. So the next line of our revenue lines that we look at, our other big portion of our local revenue, is what we refer to as our Proposition C revenue. Again, that's our sales tax revenue, again, collected locally but funneled back through us for the state, and it's calculated based on our weighted average daily attendance, or WADA, multiplied by an amount that is set by the state. And so you can see, again, our historical review starting with the last 4 years for 22, 23. Again, those are fiscal years, and so you can see what we're projecting for the current year. Fiscal year 2024, that is our current year. Our weighted average daily attendance is 18,507. And then we're multiplying that amount by our amount per weighted average daily attendance, and that amount has gone up. Our original budget, we used $1,360. Again, coming from the state this spring, our sales tax revenue is up, and so the $1,360 was increased to $1,374 per weighted average daily attendance. So that is going to be a slightly larger supplemental appropriation than coming through the state for this current fiscal year, above what was originally budgeted. And so our current revenue for the current year is right under $25.5 million. And so there's additional money going into the Proposition C at the state level for next year as well, so 24-25 budget. And so again, the amount per WADA is $1,513, and that's what we're assuming for our projections for our 24-25 budget. And so if you multiply that out, you get our revenue amount then is right over $28 million. That is about a $2.5 million increase over the current year. And that's up about 10% between this year and next year, going into the 24-25. So that additional revenue is again going into the budget, driving for next year. And then the final slide we have to go over for our state revenues is kind of a summary of our largest sources of state revenue. You can see our foundation formula is that top line, historical. We've pretty much been flat coming out of the pandemic. The state adequacy target, or what we refer to as the SAT, is increasing for the first time since prior to the pandemic. It's going to increase from $6,375 to $6,760 for FY25. And so that's what's driving that large increase between the 24 and 25 budgets. And so you can see that amount, the top line there, and the farthest right-hand column, the difference between the current year and next year is right over $8.5 million in additional revenue into the foundation formula. And then the next line down then is our classroom trust fund. That revenue comes from our gaming revenues out of this at the state level. We're also DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, is also projecting an increase of our amount per average daily attendance, or ADA, for our classroom trust revenue as well. Currently, this school year is $472 per weighted average daily attendance, and that's going to increase to $525 for next year. And so again, that increase is right under $1 million. And then our final line on the state revenue slide we show is our transportation line. And again, the information coming out of the state that was approved at the state budget last year, again, is fully funding of the transportation categorical line and the state revenue. And just a reminder, our fully funding at the state level means a maximum of 75% of expenditures. And you can, again, that's going to have a small increase because our revenues for transportation are based on the prior year expenditure data. So at the end of the year, on our annual Secretary of the Board report, which is our state report that's submitted in August, we have to submit all of our ridership data and our expenditure data for our transportation for the current year, and then our revenue for the subsequent year then is based on the current year expenditure data. So since our expenditure data increased between 2023 and 2024, we do predict that our revenue will increase between the current 2024 school year and the 24-25 budget. And so you can see that increase there. And so when you add all three of those lines together, you can see that our increase in our state revenue is an increase in state revenue that we have not seen historically, of right over $10 million in additional revenue that's going to go into our operating budget for next year. So just a couple summary of the information coming from the state budget. Again, the fiscal year 25 K-12 budget was approved last week by the Senate right before the deadline. The deadline was Friday, and so it was fully approved. You can see the line items there that were approved in that budget. The full funding of transportation, again, $361 million statewide. That is 75% of allowed costs, and that was an additional $16 million statewide that was put into the transportation budget between the current year and next year. Also, fully funding of the foundation formula, the SAT, with an increase to that $6,760, which is costing statewide an additional $120 million to be put into that state line item. Flat funding of our career ladder program is what the final approval was at the end of last week, and an increase of approximately $119 million into our Prop C, or our sales tax funding. And reminder, again, CPS does not have a waiver of our Prop C rollback requirement. We are still a handful of districts in the state that does not have a waiver of that requirement. So any additional sales tax revenues are shared with voters by lowering our property tax rate when we set that in August. And so, for example, if we receive approximately $3 million in revenue, we would share about 1.5 million of that by rolling back our property tax rate when we set that in August. And again, our final budget at the state level was adopted prior to that Friday, May 10th deadline last week. And just quickly, as we talk about the future of school funding, just revisiting some of the general provisions of Senate Bill 727 that was signed by the governor early last week. And so we are looking at the expansion of the voucher program, which that means an additional increase of educational savings account program from $50 million to $75 million. That charter school expansion, which is the big one in Boone County. Many unfunded mandates with little to no guaranteed resources beyond next year to cover the additional costs that are outlined in that Senate bill, and modifies the definition of the weighted average daily attendance as used in the foundation formula. Again, a reminder that was signed last week. And then also it increases the small schools grant from $15 million to $30 million. It changes the threshold for eligible early childhood pupils to be included in the calculation of average daily attendance from 4% to 8%. It also contains provisions that change the school year calendar. Again, not starting for the next 2 years, which you'll see the 25-26 calendar later tonight, but starting with the 26-27 school year, it'll modify the school term for districts located in charter counties, which will affect us. So will require our school year term to consist of at least 169 days, which we have the last several years since the change had been changed to just an hour requirement instead of a day requirement. And so that will be an additional consideration we'll have to take it and work with when we're building our school year calendar. And then also makes increases to our minimum teacher salary grant to a starting teacher salary of $40,000. But since CPS is already over that minimum amount, we won't be able to take advantage of any of that additional funding should it materialize at the state level. So that is on the revenue side, and a summary of where we're at to date. And then quickly, just we'll go over, I know you've seen some of these slides before, our one-time additions. These are things that'll just occur. So we have the 24-25 things that will have one time, and then the following slides have a summary of our recurring additions, which you saw last month. So they're basically the same. So one-time additions for next year, as you know, and our capital projects we've talked about last month also. We have our Career Center addition and renovation project happening, and that's going within the next year and a half. And so we will have what we call FF&E, or furnitures and fixtures that go into that building. So anything that is cost less than $1,000 that doesn't meet the requirement of a capital item, we don't typically use bond funds to be able to purchase those items. And so we make sure that there is a budget in our operating fund for the additional FF&E for those capital projects. So $250,000 for that line item. Infinite Campus is our new student information system. We had over $100,000 in stipends for this current year as a one-time spend for the current year for the first year. But we would like to consider requesting that we have just one stipend remain per building for at least one more year to be able to support the student information system. So there were multiple users per building in the current year, but this will have one stipend left per building for going forward for just one more year to help with that transition. And then a space utilization audit. I know as we've talking about attendance areas, and that was something that was coming out of our long-range facilities, that we might look at space and where we're utilizing our space for in the long term for $150,000. So one-time additions for next year for the 24-25 budget at $430,000. And then we also have already built into our five-year model for the following year for the 25-26 school year. Again, our new elementary school will open in the fall of 26, so the most of those FF&E purchases will be done during the 25-26 school year. So we have $1 million set aside for that. Our Battle Elementary addition and renovation furniture and fixtures at $250,000. And then the possible elementary math, curriculum is up for cycle review, and so we'll have a new adoption going forward in that year, in the 25-26 school year for that, for one-time additions for 25-26 of $1,750,000. And so for the sake of time tonight, our recurring additions we talked in detail about last month. The only thing that has changed on these next slides is the increase of our high school BSSA, which is our security to be able to run our weapons detection system. It was 3, and we did a review of the existing personnel in the buildings, and Hickman had 1 additional existing person that was a remaining parking lot attendant that is going to convert over to a BSSA. So we're adding 1 additional person then at Rockbridge and Battle, so we'll have a total of 5. So we said originally we were going to have 3, 1 at each high school. Hickman already has 1 more person than the other 2 high schools, so we're going to request that there's 5 total then. So we are having 1 additional at Battle and 1 additional at Rockbridge, so we have 5 additional instead of 3. So each one of the high schools in total will have the same number of BSSAs going forward. And so our total of our recurring additions and deductions on all three of these slides is 64, and that's $4.6 million in additional recurring additions going forward for the 24-25 budget. And then the next slide then shows that summary of then what all of those expenditures that we're using to build into our budget to date. So grand total of all of our employees in our operating budget is right under 2,800 employees, FTE. Again, a reminder, the cost to step on all of our salary schedules that we approved last month, the step down, that's just for experience, right under $3 million. And then the cost of salary schedule improvement, so that's all the additional money we're putting into the salary schedules. So the total of those two line items for steps and for schedule improvement is $10.5 million. And once we put benefits on top of that as well, again, reminder, some of our benefit percentages for retirement and our Social Security and those items are percentage based. So when the salaries go up, the benefit cost also goes up. And so you can see 1.6 million there. We also build in some allowance for individuals as they earn additional degrees to move across columns. And so that's our allowance for educational credit is right under 300,000. There are some savings from retirees and resignations we build in each year. And then the total FTE additions from the previous slide was 4.6 million. So that total additional cost for salaries and benefits of $16,757,166. And so, again, I know we've talked a lot about it. We had additional money going into property taxes. We have an additional $10 million at the state, coming out of the state level that we haven't seen previously. And so we're aggressive in with some of our increases to our salary schedules and additions to our one-time and recurring additions going into the 5-year model. But as you'll see on the next slide, the impact to the 5-year model is the difference between going out in future years is a lot greater than what we've seen. And rather than a gradual increase over the 5 years, you can see that the drop off as we in years 3, 4, and 5, where the revenue starts decreasing, and the expenditures start increasing, the gap between the deficit between our revenues and expenditures is much greater in that year 5 out there. So you can see we do have additional money going into the fund balance that we've talked about, that additional $5 million and some change going in for the current year and then moving out into the 5-year model. And there also was a question at Finance Committee on Wednesday night about the number of FTE for the new school. So all of the reorganization costs when we go in, when we're opening of the new school in the fall of 26, so the 26-27 school year, that is all built in for additional FTE for that. And so there's about 32 FTE that is built in. Some of those teacher FTE will be reallocated from other schools, but about half of that 32 is teacher FTE. So whether it be regular classroom teachers, specialists like music, art, PE, those teaching positions, and the other half is administrative and non-certified type positions. And so all of that is built in there and for the 26-27 school year and beyond. And there are additional monies going into salary schedules for the next 3 years as well. So I am willing to take questions from anyone that has any questions.
Ms. Snodgrass?
I had a quick question. I don't know if you included this in the 5-year model. I know you listed out, showed like for the transportation, that $6.5 million, but one of the other things that 727 did, of course, was remove the requirement
Yes.
that the voucher system only operates if transportation is funded. And so wondering within the 5-year model if that is accounted for, and also how secure do you feel about us actually getting that money for
So
the
there-
next year?
No, their transportation is reduced after the 24-25 school year in the 5-year model down to that percent. The reduction in that percentage is included in the 5-year model. And my best guess estimate and some impact to charter schools in the 5-year model as well.
Ms. Brown?
I have a few questions. On slide 8, you talked about the super user stipend for Infinite Campus. And today we have maybe several super users in some buildings, and we want to take that to one super user per building. Is that what I understand?
That is a request coming from our AID, Assessment, Intervention, and Data Department. They're sizing down, but they do feel like they still need the additional support for one more year, and so that their request was to reduce that so there's at least one person in each building to be able to have supports along with their department.
Okay. And then my next question on the same slide is, in the spring of '22, the previous board approved a space utilization audit for $250,000. This one is a space utilization audit for $150,000. Is this in addition, or did we not do the one from spring of '22?
We did not do the one.
Okay. So we actually expect it to cost $100,000 less?
That was the amount that I do not know anything about space
I don't know
utilization
either.
audits, but from our architect, that is the amount that
Awesome.
okay.
And then I'd like, you kind of answered some of my questions on BSSA, but I'm trying to wrap my head around it more. So how many will end up ultimately being at each school?
And so, yes.
At each school?
I believe so. So there's some recoding that needs to be done.
Sure.
So there was some people that were some hall monitors,
Right.
parking lot attendants, BSSAs. And so as the evolution of the security assistants have come, there was kind of some multi-use of those different people, but we're going to make a recommendation to make sure they're all coded the same. And so going forward with the addition of the 2 at Rockbridge and Battle and 1 at Hickman, there will be a total of 5 at each school.
And are there any at Douglas today? I don't know.
I don't believe so, but this is for the weapons detection system.
Right.
Was there?
So we might need one there too?
Yes, that's a possibility, as we're looking at putting a system over there, yes.
Right, that's what
Yeah.
Ken mentioned last week. Okay.
My understanding was that we're just looking at the 3 high schools for now.
Okay. Okay, next question. Slide 11 is the data protection position. You might have also answered this and I wasn't paying attention. The $100,000, that includes their salaries plus their benefits?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
Thank
All
you.
of those amounts should be salary plus benefits.
all right. I was thrown off at first when I saw that and I was like, maybe it includes
No.
benefits. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Thank you, Ms. MacArthur. The next thing on our agenda is, I think we've arrived at the consent agenda. Look at that. Okay, ta-da. Okay, I know there's 3 things that we need to remove for separate consideration. Paul needs to remove items 8E, 8B, and 8E, 14G. And I need to remove item 8E, 6N. So is there a motion to approve the agenda minus those 3 items?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and now we will approve items 8E, 8B, and 8E, 14G. And Mr. Harper, if you want to give any kind of explanation, you're
Do you
welcome
want
to.
it, are you making the
I-
motion or do you?
The,
want the
yeah, the
motion?
reason why I pulled those off is because I advise the Office of Childhood, and both of those contracts are with the Office of Childhood. So I feel like even though I was not involved in either of these contracts, I need to abstain from them for purposes of this meeting.
Fair enough. Is there a motion to approve those 2 items then?
So moved.
Second?
We'll do a roll call vote just so Mr. Harper can abstain.
Thank you. Mr. Willoughby,
Yes.
Ms. Farrow,
Yes.
Mr. Harper,
I abstain.
Oh, that was loud.
Mr. Cobbins,
Yes.
Mr. Lyman,
Yes.
Ms. Snodgrass,
Yes.
Ms. Waters.
Yes. And then I need to abstain from item 8E6N. I'm a shareholder in the company that is named in the contract. So is there a motion to approve that item?
So moved.
Second?
And another roll call vote, please.
Ms. Snodgrass,
Yes.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Mr. Cobbins,
Yes.
Ms. Farrow,
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby,
Yes.
Mr. Lyman,
Yes.
Ms. Waters.
Abstain. Okay. Thank you, everyone. All right, we have no unfinished business, so our first order of new business is the consideration of policy BCE. Is there a motion to approve that policy?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, go ahead.
I get it.
I'm not sure who had that. April had the second. Okay. Ms. Farrow had the second. Okay, is there any discussion on that policy? Mr. Harper, if you want to just explain kind of what happened?
Sure. Basically, we discussed this in March in the work session. The goals of this were to keep the three standing committee structure, but allow for greater flexibility for the committees while keeping the board, administrative, and public members, so that if we needed to have fewer members in a committee, we could do that. This also sets the terms of the committees to match the school year, which is not something that was in the prior policy. And then this of course continues to assure that all final decisions reside with the board.
Is there any discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote. This is a vote to approve policy BCE.
Okay. Mr. Cobbins,
Yes.
Ms. Farrow,
Yes.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Ms. Snodgrass,
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby,
Yes.
Mr. Lyman,
Yes.
Ms. Waters.
Yes. Okay. We've already considered the Chapter 100 bond. So we're now to consideration of the recommendation for new positions. Is there a motion for this?
So moved.
Is there
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I don't really, yes, there's discussion, but I don't know around what. There's a lot of different positions on here. Some of them that I have thoughts on, and some of them that are like, oh, this is cool. It's perfectly fine. So I don't know.
Well, I know we had discussed earlier the possibility of having this come before the board for a first read tonight and then an action item at the work session. We already have an action item at the work session, so that would not be a big change because we're going to be approving the professional development plan, or considering the professional development plan for approval at the work session. So if you wanted, if this would give you more peace of mind, you could move to amend the motion on the floor to consider this as first read and not final approval.
And our work session is just in 10 days, right?
Correct.
5 business days, right? Something like that. Yes, I would like to move for this to be first read and discussion.
Is there a second for that
Could
amendment?
I possibly make just a suggestion or recommendation? Would it be possible just to pull those that have further questions and allow to maybe vote on those that you feel are okay? So that it's just, because of time-wise, we do need to post and we need to interview. And also, it just creates a waterfall effect if, people apply for these positions and they're in other positions. It's just due to the timing and just because we are in May, if it is all possible. I know it's just 5 days or 10 days or whatever, but those are days that we really use for the hiring process.
Okay, let me look here real quick.
I have a question really quick. Just, are all of these going to be posted? Is that the intent?
All of them except the Director of Human Resources and the Executive Director of Special Services, because they actually have people in those current positions, and we would be eliminating the current positions.
Okay.
So everyone else would be posted, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So those are new job descriptions, but for the employees, they will be reclassifications.
Correct.
Is that, okay.
Ms. Farrell, what are your thoughts?
Now my brain is even hurting more. Well, Paul asked that one question and answered that one question, and you said, so basically you're proposing also to eliminate the Director of Special Services and the Assistant Director of Human Resources? Is that the correct?
Correct. We would be eliminating those positions for these positions and changing the titles and job
Okay.
descriptions. Correct.
Well, the three that I was going to propose to pull was the Executive Director of Special Services, because I have several questions about that, the Data Protection Specialist, and the HR Operations Classified Director. I know I'm not saying that right.
The Director of Human Resources for Classifieds and Operations, is that the position that is taking the place of the Assistant Director for HR?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the one you wanted to,
I guess I just had a really quick question that I could probably get answered in this, so.
okay, well.
Just
I-
pull
just-
executive director and,
Okay, so the motion, the
Yes.
amendment you want to make is to pull the Data Protection Specialist and the Executive Director of Special Services from the list of what we are approving.
yes.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay. If we don't have to have any discussion on it, we can just vote by show of hands if we want to pull these or not. All in favor of pulling them and just having them come back to us at the work session, raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay, the vote is 6-1. We will pull the Data Protection Specialist and the Executive Director of Special Services for the May work session. So there's already a motion and a second, correct? Yes, to approve the remaining positions. Is there any discussion on those? Ms. Farrell?
I have a couple of questions. In the finance update, we list a virtual education counselor and a multicultural secretary. Are those new jobs?
No.
Those
We
are not
have-
new jobs?
No, we have job descriptions already created for them.
Okay. And,
So just to clarify, the counselor will be the same counselor position like all of our other counselors. It will just be in the capacity of a virtual
Right,
counselor
we're just-
rather than a regular guidance counselor who's existing in our buildings.
Right.
So the job description is not different.
right, okay, that makes sense. And then my question surrounding the Director of HR for Classified and Operations is I noticed that job description was different than the others in that the others list minimum qualifications and then preferred qualifications, whereas this one lists education, certifications, and it mentions something about preferred experience and then others. And so my question is, do we imply that the items listed under education, experience, and other are part of the minimum requirements? I just thought it was odd that it's kind of constructed differently than the other job postings and descriptions that I've seen. So I didn't know if there was a reason why that was.
April, can you repeat that again? Can you tell me, because I believe you
Yes,
have it in front
sure.
of you and I don't.
So in all the other job postings, we list minimum qualifications and preferred qualifications. In this one, we list education, certifications, experience, and other. Under certifications, we list, I think, SHRM and then preferred. But what is the minimum requirement? Do we assume then that the minimum requirement is what is listed for education, what is listed for experience, and what is listed for other? I don't know. If I'm if I'm someone looking for a job, I don't know what the minimum qualification is for me to apply for this job by looking at this job posting. That's what my question is.
I think you're correct in they need to be consistent. And I think the minimum qualifications for this specific position would be different than the director of certified, because this position doesn't have to have an administrative degree and oversee building principles. It's more of a classified position, an hourly, but then does oversee operations, some salaried positions in, facilities and tech services, et cetera. So I would be happy to go back and edit it so that it is consistent with our other job descriptions.
I think for consistency's sake, that would be really good.
Are there any other questions about the remaining positions? Okay, this will be a roll call vote, and what we are approving is the list of positions minus the data protection specialist and the executive director of special services.
Mr. Willoughby,
Yes.
Ms. Farrow,
Yes.
Mr. Cobbins,
Yes.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Ms. Snodgrass,
Yes.
Mr. Lyman,
Yes.
Ms. Waters.
Yes. Okay. Next, we have the consideration of the 25-26 school year calendar. This is for first read and discussion, so this is another item that we will be considering for second read and approval at the work session. Correct, at the work session, Dr. Holtz? Is that the timing? Okay. Is there a motion to approve that calendar? Sorry, wow.
You just said it.
I just said it. People, I'm not a night owl, so in case anyone was wondering. Go ahead, Dr. Holtz. And I know it's not very late.
Yeah, so on behalf of the calendar committee, I'm presenting the 25-26 school year calendar for first read and discussion. So if there were any questions.
Ms. Snodgrass.
So I know this concern was brought up again, and I just want to reiterate it. And it was a concern that I brought when we had looked at the 24 and next year's calendar, where the PD days were scheduled over Rosh Hashanah. And I just want to note that on this particular calendar, we have a teacher workday the day before Rosh Hashanah, which is fine, not falling on it, although teacher-directed days are probably some of the best days where teachers have flexibility. But the block of PD days that would be the district-directed days, I'm assuming, again, Yom Kippur falls in the middle of that. And so I guess I would like to reiterate again, and I shared these as well in writing after our other one, that I have concern about how we are looking at these things and what we have available when we're considering our calendars, because I think we have a number of instances over the past few years where particularly holidays for those who non-Christian religious holidays have been in conflict with some major tests and events and scheduling items on our calendar. And while I understand that teachers have the option to request off on professional development days, it has also been brought to my attention by a number of teachers that especially the district professional development days, these are days where we're providing information that we know is really critical and essential for our teachers, and it puts them in a really awkward position to have to request it off and to have to make that choice, where either they're missing out on something that we're saying as a district we think is really critical for them to know as teachers in the classroom, or they have to not be practicing and observing a religious holiday. So I guess I have concerns and would like to see those addressed. I feel like on the previous calendar, I understand that it's hard to look out ahead. I did share a link with Dr. Yearwood that, and happy to share more directly with Cabinet. I know the university has a calendar that lists various holiday observances, and I know there's other places that have that as well. And I have concerns about what we're using when we develop the calendars to make sure that some of these things are being taken into account.
So we have several discussions in calendar committee around, holidays and those that are federal and those are non-federal. And so federal holidays that are designated, we designate those as non-work days. So if these dates weren't identified as professional development, they would be regular work days. And our staff would be following the same process to request leave. And as a district and as a leader of the HR department, we really work hard to work with our employees to make sure that we are accommodating their needs, whether it be religious, whether it be personal. We would never try to offend or not work with an employee. And so we really do try really hard to accommodate any need, whether it be religious or personal, like you said. So,
real quick, but I think that there's a fundamental difference between a day at work and a district-led PD day. And so I think it may be a little easier for a teacher to request a day off to observe a holiday, a religious holiday, on a normal school day than it would be on a day where your administrators are being told by their administrators who are being told by their administrators that if you're not at work today, it's going to be a problem. So I think that there's a pretty big difference between a normal work school day and a district-led PD day. And if it's on a holiday, we should do what we can to not have a district-led PD day on that day.
So I would hope that no principal or administrator would be communicating to our employees that it would be a problem. And if that were the case, I would, like.
Well, I don't think
we
that
would
any
wanna
principals are
address that.
necessarily doing that. I think it's more of a, it's going to be much more difficult for a teacher to ask that question, to have that day off if it's a normal school day versus if it's a PD day.
So our process is the same either way. An employee would just request it in Talent Ed records. They submit a request and then it comes to HR. And there is a comment box where the employee can explain if they would like why they're requesting that time off. And so it wouldn't be any different from a work day, the same request. And so that would come to our department for us to approve or not. And of course, we would approve that day.
Ms. Farrow, go ahead.
I think some of what John's saying is that it's easier to ask off, and it's a regular work day, because when you ask off for a professional development day, the perception might be that you just didn't want to go learn. But my choking here. My question, whenever I was looking at this, because the first thing that jumped out of me, and it just so happens to fall during those same 3 days, but there's a teacher work day on the 22nd, and then we're in school for 4 days. Then they're in school for 2 days, and the students are out of school for 3 days. Could the calendar committee consider, or did they look at, what would it be like if we had those 3 days, the 8th, 9th, and 10th, rather than the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd? Because it just seems like instructional wise, that would be beneficial rather than having 4 days in and 2 days in and then out for 3 days. And you guys, I think you have a meeting on the 21st. And then we have our work session on the 23rd where we're going to consider this. So maybe that's something that they can talk about. I don't know. And then my other question is, historically, we've sent out a survey to parents to get feedback on what they think of the calendar. But I understand, I think a survey has not gone out this year. Did we decide to forego that?
I think my understanding is that we send out a survey every 2 years, and we get feedback. I think that's what my co-chair had shared with me. But we can talk about it at our
Yeah,
next
talk about
meeting.
that. I probably have the emails from all the previous years.
Can you also just go back to, you said instead of the, just so I'm
Instead of October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd,
okay.
perhaps the 8th, 9th, and 10th. I mean, I'm just looking at the fact that, it's a teacher work day on the 22nd. They're in school for 4 days, then they come back for 2 days, and then they're out for 3. Maybe chunk that up a little bit more.
Yeah, I'd be happy to bring that back to the committee.
Mr. Harper?
I know I sent an email about this, but I just want to reiterate that I think that we need to change the IC policy that's listed there because of the issues that you and I discussed with being able to get some community members on it and not being able to get board members on it consistently. So I would just ask that that come back to the policy committee sometime in the next year, please.
Dr. Yearwood, go ahead.
Sure. I just wanted to reiterate that, yes, we must be cognizant of religious practices, freedoms, and work within the rules, the confines that we have to be very accommodating. We should always be cognizant of that. I was going to ask Miss Dr. Holst to just talk a little bit about the process that the calendar committee follows so that there's a little clarity on what happens, who's on the committee now, and so that we'll know sort of how this has come to fruition and the meetings that have occurred with this. So I was going to ask you if you don't mind sharing that with the board.
As far as who makes up the committee?
The
or how
committee
we
and
have the
sort of
discussion?
the structure to determine the calendars and so on, how that's done.
Yeah, so the calendar committee is made up of several individuals throughout the school district. It is a bargain committee, a CMNEA bargain committee. We pretty much, we take a lot of things into consideration. We have to look at our secondary testing schedules, our elementary testing schedules, MAP test. We look at when conferences are because there are dates that work sessions or work days are best so that we can prepare for grading. There are all the, and there's so many. I wish Emily Cooper was here because she's been doing this for years and years. They have a very clear system to make sure that we're taking into consideration everything kind of pre-K to high school as far as all those things. And so we have lots of discussion, but then we also have to take into consideration that our teachers have to work 187 days, as well as students have to have 1,044 hours as well. So there's all these things that we take into, we talk about them, we have discussions, we have to go back and forth, and then we also do survey staff as far as and get their thoughts as well. Emily sends out a survey to the staff members throughout the district to ask them their input. Just when we are stuck, when we think, okay, we think this may be the best, but we need to get some input, and so then we send out surveys as well. I know that's not all, there's so much that goes into it, and this honestly is my second year being part of this committee, and I feel like I have a better handle than I did the first year. There I was just sitting there like listening and taking notes and not understanding it as best as that I feel I could. This year I have a better handle on it, and I think, with experience, there's people on the committee that's been on there for like 10 years. It's just a process that is, second nature. And so there's just a lot of things that, the committee has to take into consideration.
I'm sure that's true. And we appreciate that there's a lot of pieces that have to be fit into this jigsaw puzzle exactly in the right order. And everyone has to have their correct number of hours. So it sounds like if you are able to get with the committee between now and the work session and see if it would be possible to move those professional development days, and probably circle up with Dr. Woods also about that, that would be an amenable solution to Ms. Snodgrass's concern and, which is the concern of a lot of our staff members too.
Yes, and I will also ask the question, April asked about the survey, what the frequency is for our parents as well.
Great. I know that we often do surveys for like the next year and the year after that. So you might be right about that.
And I might have misspoken because the district sent one out on May 28th of 2020, and they sent one on May 2nd of 2023. So, because I have the
You were able to
emails.
find that quickly in your email?
Yes.
She's a machine.
185,000 of them.
Wow, that's
She's already made
impressive.
a spreadsheet about this.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right. If you come up with any additional questions, please send them to Dr. Yearwood before the work session, and we'll consider it for final approval then.
Great,
Thank you. Let's see. We have the consideration of construction agreements, engagements, and change orders. Is there a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, this will be, is there any discussion? Okay, this will be a roll call vote.
Okay. Ms. Snodgrass,
Yes.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Mr. Cobbins,
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby,
Yes.
Ms. Farrow,
Yes.
Mr. Lyman,
Yes.
Ms. Waters.
Yes. All right, we made it, everyone. We have a couple of very important announcements. Ms. Farrow, I know you have a good one.
I have one.
Oh.
One too.
Okay, so Ms. Farrow and then Mr. Lyman.
I'm so excited about this. And I also want to say that I was way off. My prediction was we would get out of here at midnight. So, wow. I've got half the evening still left. But a couple of years ago, the school board changed policy BDDH, the public participation at meetings. And since that time, we've gotten a lot of feedback on being available to our community. And so we've been working on a calendar to have listening sessions. And we will be starting our first one. It will be on May 29th. It will be at Battle High School from 6 to 7:30 p.m. We will be making sure that we publicize this, get information out on the website, and various locations. The idea is we will have these 4 times a year. We will have them in different locations throughout the community, so people can, from wherever they're at, they'll be able to get to one. And we obviously can't speak about things that might be disciplinary in nature, grievance might be part of a lawsuit, but it's an opportunity to come and share with us your thoughts and concerns. It's an opportunity to, maybe ask us where to find a document on the internet. I don't know. But, and while it happens to be May 29th and we're in the midst of boundary changes, you don't have to just come and talk to us about boundary changes. It can be, anything. We've gotten lots of feedback on boundary changes, but if you want to come and talk about boundary changes, that would be fine. So we're really excited about this. We're going to be tracking who comes, how many come, and the different topics so we can see how successful this endeavor is going to be. Anybody have anything else to add?
There won't be the full board there. It'll be a rotation of board members at any particular listening session. And it's meant to be an informal thing, just to come and talk, and we'll see how it goes. We're gonna try it out. Hit it.
Yep. I meant to do this early when we did all the fun stuff, but this past, if I'm thinking right, or if I did it right, this past weekend was the homeschool communicator basketball tournament for all of the elementary schools, and Grant Elementary and Paxton Keeley Elementary won the tournaments. So that was very exciting for them. So it was cool. So that's it.
And Mr. Harper is on the radio tomorrow on KFRU at 8:30, along with Dr. Yearwood. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Happy day after Mother's Day for all of us nurturers in here. All right, thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I moved.
Okay, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Okay.
Sure. We all
Yeah.
did.